When we bought the house, everything felt like a beginning. Fresh paint, unopened boxes, two people who thought love was enough to fill every empty room. My husband was proud, always talking about how this was our first real place. He spent hours setting up his office, making plans, working late. I told myself that was normal. That's what ambitious people do. But the truth was, I started spending a lot of time alone in that new house. The silence had a way of stretching, of reminding me that he was out there chasing something I couldn't see. That's when Alex started showing up. He'd been my husband's best friend since college, the kind of person who could make anyone laugh, the kind of man who never seemed in a hurry. He'd stop by after work with a bag of takeout or offer to help unpack. "Don't let him make you do all the heavy lifting," he'd joke, rolling up his sleeves like he actually meant it. At first, it was harmless. He fixed the garden light that wouldn't turn on, helped hang the curtains, even brought me a toolbox he said I should claim as my own. We'd sit on the porch after sunset, drinking coffee while waiting for my husband to get home. Sometimes Alex would tell stories about their college years, things my husband never mentioned. He'd talk about how they used to stay up all night dreaming big, and I'd smile, trying to imagine my husband like that again, alive, laughing, before work swallowed him whole. One evening, while Alex was helping with the bookshelf, the power flickered and went out completely. He pulled out his phone for light, and for a few seconds, the only sound was our laughter echoing in the dark. It wasn't romantic, not yet, but it was real. When the lights came back on, he looked at me and said, "You've made this place feel like a home already." And I remember thinking how strange it was, that the person making me feel seen wasn't the one I married. The next few weeks fell into a quiet rhythm. My husband left early and came home late. I stopped asking what time he'd be back, the answer was always soon. Alex still dropped by. Sometimes he said he was just passing through, but we both knew that wasn't really true. He'd show up with coffee or a bag of groceries, claiming the store had a sale. "Figured you might need help carrying it," he'd grin, setting the bags down before I could argue. It started to feel normal, too normal. We'd fix small things around the house together, argue over the right way to hang photos, play music while painting the guest room. It was easy. With my husband, everything lately felt like work, every sentence careful, every silence heavier than it should be. But with Alex, the air didn't weigh anything. One afternoon, he asked about my old job, the one I quit when we moved. "Do you miss it?" I laughed. "Sometimes. I miss feeling useful." "You are useful," he said, so simply that I almost believed it. That night, I mentioned to my husband that Alex had stopped by again. He didn't even look up from his laptop. "Good," he said. "He's a good guy. Glad he's keeping you company." And just like that, he unknowingly gave me permission to keep seeing him. Days turned into habits. Coffee together in the mornings when Alex worked from home. Short visits that stretched into hours. Little things, like him remembering how I take my tea, or the way he'd wait until I left before telling the next story. Sometimes I'd catch myself wondering what he thought when he looked at me. Then I'd shake it off, tell myself it didn't matter. Because it didn't. We were just friends. At least, that's what I kept saying. It started with small things, glances that lasted a second too long, words that carried more meaning than they should have. He'd show up, same easy smile, same casual tone. But something was shifting underneath it all, quiet and undeniable. One afternoon, he came by to drop off a drill he'd borrowed. I was in the kitchen, hair tied up, paint on my hands from the living room wall. "You've got it all under control," he said, leaning against the counter. "Barely," I laughed, brushing a strand of hair away. "I'm starting to think this house hates me." He smiled. "No, it just needs you to stop trying to make it perfect." It was such a simple thing to say, yet it hit me harder than it should have. My husband used to say similar words, years ago, before work became the center of his world. We sat outside afterward, the air warm, cicadas humming in the background. He told me about a trip he wanted to take someday, maybe across Europe, no plans, no schedule. I told him I couldn't remember the last time I did something just for myself. He looked at me, quiet for a moment. You should, he said. You're the kind of person who deserves to live, not just exist. I didn't know how to respond. So I laughed, the kind of laugh that hides more than it shows. Later that night, when my husband got home, I told him about the paint color we chose for the living room. He didn't notice the slip. He just said, "Looks fine," before heading to his office. I stood there in the hallway, the echo of Alex's words still in my mind. You deserve to live. And for the first time in a long time, I felt seen, and guilty for liking it. I used to wait for my husband to come home. I'd listen for the sound of his car in the driveway, the key turning in the door, the usual, "Hey, babe, you still awake?" But now, I was waiting for something else. Someone else. It wasn't intentional. That's what I kept telling myself. But every afternoon, around the same time, I'd start cleaning the kitchen, fixing my hair, pretending to be busy, like maybe he'd drop by again, and I just happened to look presentable. Alex never said when he'd come. He just showed up, always at the right moment, when the silence in the house got too loud, or when I couldn't stand the sound of my husband's voice through another endless conference call. One day, he stopped by with pizza and 2 bottles of soda. You looked tired last time I saw you, he said. Figured you needed a break from being perfect. I laughed. You keep saying that like it's a bad thing. He smiled. No, it's just, you don't look like someone who gets to be messy. You should, sometimes. We ate on the floor, between unpacked boxes, laughing at how fancy that wasn't. For a few hours, I forgot everything, the emails, the calendar reminders, the invisible distance between me and my husband that no one else seemed to notice. When my husband came home that night, the first thing he said was, "Smells like pizza." Yeah, I said, smiling too quickly. Alex dropped by. He nodded, loosening his tie. Good. Glad you're not bored while I'm gone all day. I wanted to tell him I wasn't bored, I was lonely. But I didn't. Because the person I wanted to say that to wasn't him. Over the next few weeks, the pattern repeated, dinners that weren't planned, jokes that felt like secrets, moments that lingered too long. Every boundary stayed technically intact, but it felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, leaning forward just to see how far I could go without falling. Once, Alex came over to help hang a picture in the hallway. He stood behind me, guiding my hands to keep the frame straight. His breath brushed against my neck, light, unintentional, maybe, but it sent a shiver through me I couldn't explain away. He stepped back quickly, clearing his throat. Looks good, he said. Yeah, I whispered, my voice barely there. That night, I couldn't sleep. The memory of that moment kept looping in my head, mixed with guilt and something worse, anticipation. And I knew then, I wasn't waiting for friendship anymore. I was waiting for something I shouldn't want. The next few weeks blurred together, coffee runs, quick visits, inside jokes that no one else would understand. What once felt innocent now felt like something neither of us wanted to name. He started texting me, small things at first. Did you ever fix that lamp? Your husband still on those calls all night? You should eat something, don't skip lunch again. I told myself it was just friendly. But no one should feel their heart skip a beat over a text that simple. One afternoon, I asked him to help me move a few boxes into the attic. The summer heat made the air heavy, we were both sweating, laughing about how useless the ceiling fan was. When I lost my balance on the ladder, he caught my arm. It was just a touch, quick, steady, but it lingered. His hand stayed there a second too long, and we both knew it. We didn't say anything. We didn't have to. That night, I sat beside my husband on the couch while he scrolled through emails. He asked how my day was, and I said fine. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. I noticed the contrast, how quiet we'd become, how mechanical our words sounded. Meanwhile, Alex made me laugh so hard I forgot what time it was. A few days later, he stopped by again. He'd brought a small cactus in a ceramic pot. "It doesn't need much attention," he said with a smirk. "Kind of like me." I laughed, maybe too much. "So, you're saying I'm neglecting you?" He looked at me then, really looked. "Not yet." The air shifted. Something invisible but alive hung between us. I changed the subject. He didn't push. When he left, I found myself standing at the door longer than necessary, watching him walk down the driveway. That night, while brushing my teeth, I caught my reflection and almost didn't recognize the woman in the mirror. She looked younger, restless, guilty, and a little bit excited. I turned off the light and whispered to the dark. "You're not doing anything wrong." But deep down, I already knew I was lying. It happened slowly, like a song fading in, quiet at first, but impossible to ignore once you start listening. Alex became the person I could talk to about anything. He remembered the little details my husband never noticed, the kind of coffee I liked, the podcast I listened to when I cleaned, the fact that I hated silence during breakfast. He'd drop by unannounced, always with some excuse. "Your mailbox hinge was loose," or, "I was just driving by." But we both knew those excuses didn't matter anymore. His presence was its own kind of habit, dangerous, familiar, comforting. One evening, we sat on the porch, the sun melting into orange behind the trees. I told him about how my husband and I barely spoke anymore. "He's not a bad man," I said softly. "He's just, somewhere else. All the time." Alex didn't interrupt. He just listened. That's what made it worse, he always listened. When I finished talking, he looked at me for a long moment. "You deserve to be seen," he said quietly. And the way he said it, calm, certain, like a truth I'd been afraid to admit, made something inside me shift. I tried to change the subject, but he stopped me. "You keep apologizing for being lonely," he said. "You shouldn't. You didn't do anything wrong." I smiled, even though my chest felt heavy. "Not yet," I whispered. The porch light flickered, then went out completely. A small power surge, the second one that week. We sat in the dark, the world reduced to shadows and our breathing. The silence was thick, too real, too close. He reached out, instinctively, brushing a strand of hair from my face. I felt his fingers hesitate halfway, like he was testing his own restraint. Then he pulled back, standing up too quickly. "I should go," he said. "Yeah," I breathed, but neither of us moved. When he finally walked away, I stayed there, still, silent, caught between guilt and longing. And in that quiet house, I realized something I didn't want to admit. It wasn't that Alex saw me. It was that I wanted him to. The next morning, I decided to stop seeing him. I told myself I'd put distance between us, no more texts, no more visits, no more excuses. I even muted his number, as if silence could erase temptation. For a few days, it worked. The house felt emptier than usual, but at least I could breathe. My husband seemed to notice my sudden quiet. He asked once, "Everything okay?" I smiled and said yes, and that was enough for him to stop asking. Then, on Saturday, he mentioned something casually over breakfast. "Alex is coming by this afternoon. The fence in the backyard is loose," he said he'd help me fix it. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. "Oh. That's nice." I spent the rest of the morning trying to act normal, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking when I made coffee. When Alex arrived, his car door slammed like thunder in my chest. He greeted me politely, too politely, as if we were strangers again. "Hey. Long time no see." "Yeah," I said. "Been busy." He smiled faintly. "Me too." The afternoon dragged. My husband and Alex worked outside, hammering and joking while I pretended to read inside. Every laugh from the backyard made my pulse tighten. Later, my husband got a call from work, another urgent situation. He apologized, said he'd be gone an hour. You two can finish without me. The moment his car left the driveway, the air changed. Alex leaned on the fence, breathing hard from the heat. You okay? He asked. I'm fine. He studied me for a second, then said, You've been avoiding me. I didn't answer. I just kept staring at the wooden boards between us, like they could hold back everything I felt. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You don't have to pretend it didn't happen, whatever this is. I looked up then, and for a heartbeat, I forgot how to lie. But before I could say anything, the sound of a car in the distance snapped us back to reality. My husband's. We both stepped away fast, as if we'd been burned. That night, I barely slept. The silence between me and my husband felt heavier than ever. And in that silence, one truth kept echoing in my head. Distance didn't make me forget Alex, it only made me miss him more. A week later, my husband suggested inviting a few friends over for dinner, a small get-together, something normal. He said it with that tired smile that made me wonder if he even wanted to be there. Of course, Alex came too. He always did. He brought a bottle of wine and that same familiar calmness that filled every empty space in the room. The evening started light, laughter, music, the smell of roasted vegetables filling the kitchen. For a while, I almost believed everything was fine. Alex joked with my husband, helped in the kitchen, handed me a glass of wine with an easy smile that felt too personal to be harmless. As the night went on, people began to leave. My husband was the first to disappear, another call from work. He kissed my cheek, whispered, Don't wait up, and walked out, leaving half a glass of wine on the counter. The house grew quieter, softer, dimly lit by the warm light over the dining table. Alex stayed to help clean up. You don't have to, I said. He shrugged. I don't mind. We worked in silence for a few minutes. I passed him plates, he dried them. Our hands brushed once, twice, each time lingering a second longer. I could feel the weight of everything unsaid pressing between us. When the last glass was put away, he leaned against the counter, watching me. You always look tired lately, he said. Does he even notice? I looked at him, trying to find words that wouldn't betray me. He's just busy. Alex smiled sadly. He's always busy. Something in his tone broke whatever wall I had left. I stepped closer without meaning to. He didn't move back. Don't, I whispered, but my voice didn't sound convincing, even to me. For a few seconds, neither of us breathed. Then he reached up, tucking a loose strand of hair behind my ear. His fingers lingered, tracing my cheek. It was so gentle, so careful, like he was asking permission without saying a word. I should have stepped away. Instead, I just stood there, eyes closed, heart pounding, the air between us electric. The power flickered suddenly, a quick blackout, and for a moment, the kitchen went dark. I felt his hand tighten slightly on my arm, a reflex, protection. The light came back just as fast, but it was too late. The moment had already changed everything. He pulled back first, his voice low. I should go. Yeah, I said quietly. You should. But as he left, I realized my hands were still shaking, not from fear, but from the way his touch had felt like something I'd been waiting for. I didn't see him for days after that dinner. No texts, no visits, nothing. The silence should have been a relief, but it wasn't. It felt like withdrawal. Every time my phone buzzed, I hoped it was him. Every time it wasn't, I felt the ache a little sharper. My husband noticed my distraction, mistook it for stress. He offered to take a weekend off, maybe plan a short trip. Just us, he said, smiling. Like old times. I nodded, but deep down I knew there were no old times left to return to. On Thursday, Alex texted me for the first time in almost a week. Can I stop by? Just to talk. I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. You shouldn't. But I didn't say no. That evening, when his car lights flashed across the driveway, my heart reacted before my mind did. I opened the door before he could knock. He stood there, hesitant, his voice quieter than usual. "I didn't come here to make things harder." "They already are," I said. We ended up sitting in the living room, the only light coming from a small lamp by the couch. It felt like we were hiding in plain sight. He talked about work, about how he'd been trying to stay away. I nodded, pretending I believed him. Then he looked at me, his voice breaking just slightly. "I can't stop thinking about you." The room fell silent. I felt the air shift, heavy and magnetic. "Don't say that," I whispered, though I didn't want him to stop. "I mean it," he said. "I've tried to forget, but I can't." I should have ended it there, stood up, told him to go, locked the door. But I didn't move. I couldn't. The clock ticked loudly in the corner. The house seemed to shrink around us, walls closing in on the words we hadn't dared to say. Finally, I whispered, "Then stop pretending." He reached for my hand, slow, uncertain. Our fingers met, and this time, neither of us pulled away. We sat like that for what felt like forever, in the quiet that was no longer safe. And when I finally looked up, the distance between us was gone. He leaned in, his forehead resting against mine, and in that breath between fear and wanting, the world stopped making sense. It was a Friday night, one of those quiet evenings when the world outside feels paused. My husband had packed for a last-minute business trip, promising to be back in 2 days. He kissed me on the forehead before leaving, said he'd call when he landed. When the door closed behind him, the silence in the house felt different. Heavy. Expectant. I tried to distract myself, turned on a movie, made tea, folded laundry that didn't need folding. But every sound, every still moment, reminded me of what I was avoiding. By the time my phone lit up with Alex's name, I already knew I'd answer. He said he was nearby, that he'd left something here, an old tool he'd lent my husband. His voice sounded uncertain, softer than usual. I told him to come by, though we both knew he didn't forget anything. When he arrived, the house was dimly lit, only a few lamps on. The power had flickered earlier that day, so the hallway lights wouldn't turn on. It made the place feel smaller, warmer, like we were the only 2 people left awake. We sat in the kitchen at first, talking about nothing. He made me laugh once, and for a second, everything felt normal again, until it didn't. He reached out to brush something off my shoulder, fingers hesitating there longer than they should. I didn't move. "I keep telling myself to stop," he said quietly. "But I can't." The words sank into the space between us, thick and dangerous. I wanted to tell him to leave, to protect what was left of my sanity, but my body refused to listen. When I finally looked up, he was already close, close enough that I could see every thought he was trying to hide. I whispered, "Alex." But it wasn't a warning. He kissed me then, slowly, carefully, like he was afraid the world might end if he wasn't gentle enough. And maybe, in some small way, it did. For a moment, time didn't exist. There was only the sound of our breathing and the faint hum of the refrigerator in the dark. Then he pulled away, eyes heavy with something between regret and relief. "I should go," he said. I nodded, though my heart didn't want him to. When I woke up the next morning, the house was bright again, sunlight pouring through the windows like nothing had happened. On the counter, beside a half-empty mug, was a note in his handwriting. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have stayed." But the truth was, he hadn't stayed, not really. Only his absence did. The weekend passed in a blur. My husband came home Sunday evening, tired but cheerful, full of stories about meetings and airports and delays. He hugged me like everything was the same, and for a terrifying second, I almost believed it was. But then he looked at me. Really looked. "Are you okay?" he asked. "You seem distant." I smiled, too quickly. "Just tired. Didn't sleep much while you were gone." He nodded, kissed my forehead, and let it go. He always let things go, that was part of the problem. The days that followed felt unreal. I went through every routine like muscle memory: morning coffee, folded towels, dinners that didn't taste like anything. But inside, everything had changed. The house felt smaller, quieter, haunted by a memory I couldn't tell anyone about. I avoided Alex. No calls, no messages. I deleted his number twice and still remembered it by heart. But avoidance didn't erase what happened. It only made it echo louder. One evening, my husband came into the kitchen holding my phone. "You got a message," he said casually. My stomach twisted. "Who from?" "Alex," he said, unlocking the screen without hesitation. "He just said you forgot this." "What did you forget?" I froze, forcing a smile. "Probably something from the garage. He borrowed tools the other day." He nodded slowly, watching me a second too long. Then he handed me the phone. "You've been quiet lately. I just hope everything's okay." "Everything's fine," I whispered, even though my voice trembled. That night, he fell asleep beside me easily. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word, every look, every lie. At 2 a.m., I got up and went to the kitchen for water. My phone buzzed again, another message. "We need to talk." I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. I didn't reply. But the next morning, my husband's tone was different. Short. Distant. The kind of quiet that means someone's starting to put the pieces together. And I knew then, the secret I'd tried to bury was already making its way to the surface. It happened on a Wednesday. Ordinary, uneventful, almost peaceful, until it wasn't. I was folding laundry when my husband walked in holding his phone. His face was pale, unreadable. "Did you see him again?" he asked. His voice was calm, but it carried something heavier than anger: certainty. I didn't answer. My silence was enough. He nodded slowly, like someone solving a puzzle they didn't want to finish. "I thought I was losing my mind," he said. "But I wasn't. I was just losing you." The room felt smaller. I tried to speak, to say it wasn't what he thought, that it was a mistake, that it meant nothing. But lies couldn't fit in my throat anymore. He set the phone on the table. A photo glowed on the screen, a reflection from the night it happened. Just enough to confirm what words never could. "Why him?" he asked softly. "Out of everyone, why my best friend?" Tears blurred everything. "Because he was here," I whispered. "When you weren't." He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He just exhaled, long, tired, final. Then he said the words that cut deeper than any scream. "I hope it was worth it." He packed a bag that night and didn't look back. The house echoed with every door that closed. Days passed, maybe weeks. I stopped keeping track. Alex didn't come, didn't call. I think he knew there was nothing left to say. Sometimes I sit on the porch where we used to talk and imagine a world where I made a different choice. But regret doesn't rewrite anything, it just lives beside you, quietly, forever. I still hear my husband's words when the house goes still. I hope it was worth it. And no matter how many times I replay it in my head, the answer never changes. It wasn't.